Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Today I will talk about the types and properties of the soil and how we can differentiate between them. I have three types of the soil. They are the main type the main types of the soil. Have sand and salt and clay soil. Today we'll talk about how we can differentiate between them by first by the components. The sand components, it consists of sand particles, salt, soil. It contains a mix of gravel and sand, clay, salt, and more humus. And we have clay. It consists of clay and salt. The color of the sand is yellow color, and the size of particles, like we see, large, and the spaces between the particles is the space between the particles is large, as we see. Okay, what about the color of the silt soil? It is gray, and the size of the particles is medium, and the space between the particles is also medium. The clay soil, its color is dark or black, and like we see, they are very small particles, and the space between the particles is very tiny, as we see. Okay, then I will talk about the rising of the water in the soil. This is the activity in your ministry book. Okay, you will, to do this activity, you will bring test tube, and you will put test tube, and you will put the type of the soil which you want. If you wanted to put, for example, the here the sand soil, okay, then you will cover it with cloth, and then you will put it as we see. This is the piece of cloth to cover it. Okay, the particles of the sand, as we see. I will put it in a tank of water. This is a tank of water. Here, the particles of the sand. I cover it with piece of cloth. I have here the blue particles of water. then I will immerse the test tube like we see in water, and I will observe the rising of the molecules of the water up. I will observe that the rising of the water is less or low, because the holding of the water is low, because we have large space or large distance between the particles of the sand, as we see. So here they can't, or the holding of the water is less. Okay, then I will put salt. Here we know that the size of the salt is medium and the distance between them is medium, and the holding of the water is medium. So you will observe that rising of the water molecules is also medium, like we see. Okay, then I will put particles, or this is the particles of the water, like we see. I will put the particles of the clay. They are very small, and the space between them is tiny, or the spaces between them are tiny, between the molecules, and they hold the holding of water is high. So the rising of the water will be also high, as we see. Okay, this is about the rising of the water. The rising of the water is also called water absorption. Water absorption in sand, like rising of the water, is low, and the salt is medium, in the clay is high. This is activity in your ministry book. Let's talk about another activity. The another activity is called or it is related by drainage of the water. Drainage of the water أو تسرب المياه. Here I have funnel and test tube, and I will put here. Let's talk about the first sand soil. نتكلم الأول على sand soil. Here we have sand soil. The particles is large and the space between them is very large, as we see. Then I will pour some of the particles of the water. When I pour some particles of the water, the water, like we see, it will move faster in between the particles of the sand, because we have large distance between each particles, or between the particles of the sand. Okay, so the drainage of the water is fast. Okay, I will put, instead of the soil, sand soil, I will put a silt soil. Here, silt soil. So particles between, or particles size of the particles is medium. The space between them is medium. As we see, when we pour the particles of the water, they will move, like we see, less than in the case of the sand. So the drainage of the water is medium, as we see. Okay, instead of the salt, I will put clay soil. They are very close, and the particle size of the particles is small, and the space between the particles is very tiny. When we pour some of the water, what will happen? The particles over the particles of the water will move slowly, as we see. Why? Because the spaces between the particles is the particles of the clay is very small, as we see. Okay. Soil pollution. Before I will talk about soil pollution, I will talk about fertility. Fertility, it is related to the amount of humus. So the most fertility, or the highly fertility soil, is the silt soil. Why? Because it contains more humus. So sand soil less fertile, silt soil is highly fertile, clay soil is fertile. Suitable plants which can grow in the sand soil, we have here some examples about the potatoes, sweet potatoes, peanut, and so on. Salt soil, we have strawberry, lemon, orange. Clay soil, we have cotton, sugar cane, and wheat and rice. So this is the end of our or how to differentiate between the sand, salt, and the clay soil. Let's talk about the last point. It is the soil pollution. What's meant by soil pollution? It is any change in the properties of the soil. We have some reasons or some factors which causes the soil pollution, like chemical pesticides, chemical fertilizers, and industrial wastes. This is the end of our lesson today.